The sign was small, simple, and legal, but it triggered a reaction no one expected. By the end of the day, sirens would scream, neighbors would panic, and the truth would silence an entire HOA. Ethan had placed the sign that morning at the edge of his land. It read, "Private property. No trespassing. Nothing aggressive. Nothing dramatic. Just a boundary, clearly marked." He had every right to place it there. The land deed was filed, verified, and older than the neighborhood itself, but before noon, a familiar figure appeared. Karen, the HOA's loudest voice, stood staring at the sign like it had personally insulted her. She took photos, made calls, and paced with purpose. Ethan watched from a distance. Calm but curious. He knew this look. It meant trouble. Within minutes, Karen began telling nearby residents that Ethan was breaking HOA rules, blocking shared access, and threatening the community's safety. None of it was true. The land wasn't part of the HOA. It never had been. But Karen spoke with confidence, and people listened. Then she did something no one expected. She dialed 911. As police vehicles approached, whispers spread through the street. Some neighbors looked worried. Others looked satisfied. Karen stood with crossed arms, certain she had finally put Ethan in his place. Ethan didn't argue. He didn't remove the sign. He simply waited, because what Karen didn't know, what none of them knew, was that the land beneath their feet held a history buried deeper than HOA paperwork. And once the truth came out, this call would change everything. The police cars stopped slowly, lights flashing but sirens silent. Karen straightened her posture, already rehearsing her version of the story. Confident authority was finally on her side. Two officers stepped out and approached calmly. Karen rushed forward, explaining how Ethan had placed an illegal sign, restricted HOA access, and refused to cooperate. She spoke fast, emotional, and loud enough for neighbors to hear. Ethan stood quietly near the sign, hands relaxed, expression steady. When asked, Ethan didn't interrupt. He waited until the officer turned to him and simply said the land was private and not part of the HOA. Karen laughed, loud and dismissive, insisting everyone already knew otherwise. She demanded the officers force Ethan to remove the sign immediately. One officer asked for documentation. Karen froze for a moment, then claimed the HOA records would prove everything. Ethan nodded calmly and walked to his truck. He returned holding a folder, thick and worn, edges softened by time. Inside were land deeds, survey maps, and county stamps dating back decades. The officer studied them carefully, step by step. Karen's voice grew quieter as minutes passed. Neighbors leaned closer, sensing the shift. The officer made a call to verify the records. Karen tried to interrupt, but the second officer gently asked her to step back. The power she relied on was slipping, and she could feel it. Ethan said nothing. He didn't need to. The truth was doing the work for him, and as the officer ended the call, his expression changed, signaling this situation was far bigger than anyone expected. The officer looked up and asked a single question that stunned everyone. "Ma'am, are you aware this land has never been under HOA authority?" Silence fell over the street. Karen's face drained of color. She stammered, insisting there must be a mistake, that the HOA had managed the area for years. The officer calmly explained that management did not equal ownership. According to county records, the land belonged solely to Ethan and his family. Neighbors exchanged confused looks. Some pulled out phones, quietly searching property maps. Others stared at the sign again, seeing it differently now. It wasn't defiance. It was truth. Karen attempted to shift blame, claiming misinformation, outdated files, and shared access agreements. The officer shook his head. None existed. The HOA's authority ended several yards before the sign. The second officer reminded Karen that calling 911 over a civil matter could have consequences. Her confident tone collapsed into whispers. She avoided eye contact, suddenly unsure of every word she spoke. Ethan finally spoke, calmly explaining how the land had been in his family long before the neighborhood was built. The HOA, he said, had assumed control without verification. No challenge. No resistance. Until now, the officers thanked Ethan for his cooperation and turned to leave. Karen stood frozen, surrounded by neighbors who now questioned everything she had ever enforced. As the cars pulled away, Ethan replaced the folder in his truck. The sign remained exactly where it was, but the silence left behind was louder than any siren, and it marked the beginning of an unraveling Karen never saw coming. The next morning, the neighborhood felt different. No warnings, no notices, just quiet curiosity and growing doubt. Neighbors approached Ethan carefully, asking questions they'd never dared before. He answered honestly, showing records, maps, and timelines. Each conversation peeled back another layer of control the HOA had built on assumption rather than fact. Karen stayed indoors. Her authority, once unquestioned, now felt fragile. The sign stood untouched, a symbol of boundaries finally respected. HOA emails went unanswered. Meetings were postponed. Silence replaced orders. County officials visited later that week to re-verify boundaries. Their findings matched Ethan's records perfectly. Notices were issued. The HOA's jurisdiction was officially corrected. What they never owned, they could no longer control. Property access rules were rewritten. Fees were adjusted. Several residents realized they had paid for years over land the HOA never managed. Trust cracked, then shattered. Ethan didn't celebrate. He stayed calm, consistent, and respectful. He wasn't seeking revenge. He only wanted what was his acknowledged. That restraint earned him something rare: respect. Karen eventually emerged, avoiding eye contact, her voice softer than anyone remembered. She said little. There was nothing left to argue. As the sun set behind the sign, neighbors gathered quietly nearby. Some apologized. Others thanked Ethan. The street no longer felt ruled. It felt shared, but one question lingered in every mind: how much more had the HOA assumed without right? And as records continued to surface, it became clear this story was far from over. As documents surfaced, the HOA's influence continued to collapse quietly but completely. Residents who once followed every rule now questioned every notice. Meetings were canceled one after another. Emails from the board went unanswered. People compared maps, deeds, and fees they had paid for years without proof. The realization hurt more than anger. They hadn't been protected. They had been controlled. Ethan never pushed the issue. He didn't demand refunds or apologies. He focused on clarity. He posted verified county maps online and invited anyone with questions to see them. Transparency did what confrontation never could. Trust shifted. Karen finally appeared at a rescheduled meeting. Visibly smaller, without authority behind her. She attempted to explain the confusion, but her words lacked certainty. No one interrupted. No one defended her. The silence spoke louder than resistance. County officials confirmed the final boundary corrections. The HOA's jurisdiction shrank overnight. Rules were rewritten. Fines dissolved. Residents felt relief mixed with embarrassment. Ethan watched from the back of the room, calm as always. When asked to speak, he reminded everyone this wasn't about winning. It was about truth and respecting boundaries, both legal and personal. That night, the sign remained in place, untouched and accepted. It no longer felt threatening. It felt honest. But as more people reviewed their own property lines, a larger question emerged: how much else had been assumed without proof? And who would answer for it? The truth had started something no one could stop. The weeks that followed reshaped the neighborhood in ways no vote ever had. Without constant enforcement, people began talking again, not as rule followers, but as neighbors. Some residents discovered their lots extended further than the HOA had claimed. Others learned shared spaces weren't shared at all. Quiet adjustments replaced loud arguments. Law replaced assumption. Karen resigned shortly after. No announcement. No farewell. Just absence. Her name disappeared from emails and boards. The power she once wielded vanished without resistance. Ethan was approached with offers, settlements, access agreements, even money. He declined most politely. His goal was never profit. It was correction. He allowed reasonable access where it made sense, documented clearly, signed legally, and recorded publicly. The neighborhood stabilized. Property values recovered. Realtors cited the clarity as a strength, not a flaw. What once felt like chaos became structure grounded in truth. One evening, a neighbor thanked Ethan for staying calm when anger would have been easier. He replied simply that land doesn't need loud voices. It needs clear lines. As the sun dipped behind the sign, children played nearby, unaware of the tension that once filled the street. The land felt lighter, like it could finally breathe, yet one final step remained. Records still needed closure. And when the final county filing was scheduled, everyone knew it would mark the true end of an era. The last page had not yet been turned. The final documents were signed on a quiet morning under clear skies, no crowd. No arguments. Just truth recorded where it belonged. County seals stamped the corrected boundaries permanently. The HOA's reach was officially limited, their authority defined instead of assumed. Copies were shared openly, ensuring no confusion would return. Ethan placed a small marker near the sign, honoring his family's history with the land. It wasn't a warning. It was a reminder that ownership carries responsibility, not dominance. The neighborhood moved forward without fear. No surprise fines. No sudden rules. People respected boundaries because they finally understood them. Peace replaced pressure. Karen was never mentioned again. Her silence remained her final statement. Ethan didn't remove the sign. He didn't need to. It had served its purpose. What once triggered sirens now represented clarity. As he walked the edge of his land that evening, Ethan knew the real victory wasn't proving someone wrong. It was proving truth didn't need force. It only needed patience and proof. The story spread quietly, shared as a lesson rather than gossip. Know your land. Know your rights. And never assume authority without truth behind it. And that was the final twist in this unbelievable HOA story. If you love the drama, don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment sharing your thoughts. It really helps this channel grow.